This is Lynn with Paper Life, and today I want to kind of show you how I do a one signature soft cover journal. This is kind of an odd size, but the reason for that is it goes inside this journal, which is done up like a travel journal, and it's got the elastics in the bottom. So my size is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, say 5 inches by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 1/4. So one of the things I like to do, and I actually did this prior to coming on here, is once I get all my pages folded over where I want them, I trim them all then, because if not, you'll have it where it starts to step out. It's just one of those things that I like to do. So I have a coffee stain paper, a jelly plate, music paper. I like having different papers in my journals. It feels like it gives it kind of that instant character. This is a paper stained by Billy Joe that she sent me, and I love the way it looks. I'm doing this one up, I believe, for our December daily, so there are 8 pages in here, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 pages, and then the one envelope folded in half. So when I did the cover, I got 2 pieces of cardstock, and I did the same thing. I just cut it down with it on top of my papers so that it was the same size all the way around. But I did 2 of them that way. Let me see, move some of this stuff out of my way. So here's the other one, which these are the same exact sizes. And the reason for that is the fabric's going to give it that little extra hangover room, I guess. And what I did was I tore my fabric. I love the frayed edge that you get. Here's what's going to be on my cover. And I'm going to show you kind of how I did it with this one. I did write top on the inside of both of my pages, so when I glue the 2 together, you won't see that anymore. And I'm going to use glue stick. I will be sewing these together afterwards as well, but if you weren't going to sew them, I would put the glue stick around and then do like Fabri-Tac, just to make sure that it's really held down. And I'm probably even going to do that on this a little bit. Okay, so what I have is just my little iron, but adding the heat on this is really going to make that glue stick stick and hold a lot better. Oh, it came unplugged. Of course, any iron would work on this. I would just turn off your steam setting. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is take my Fix is what I'm using right now. No, I'm using Fabri-Tac. They're all the same, so use whichever one you want. And this doesn't have to be really greatly held together. I just want it mostly held together, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And then what I'm going to do is run a bead of glue along this top edge, along this edge, or the side edge. That's the nice thing about these Sugar Belle bottles, is that you can put a thin bead down. Across the bottom as well. Now, if you are sewing this, you could probably skip the step of putting the Fabri-Tac down, but I can't seem to ever sew without having something move on me, so I like to have it glued down first. And then all I'm going to do is just kind of push these edges together. Tell you what, this is probably still a little warm, so let me get some of this heat going. That'll help it set a little quicker. Yeah, it's just barely warm. So my goal when I'm sewing is to go around the edge of where that paper is. And I can kind of fill it with my fingers. And I'm just trying to kind of push those two pieces of fabric together. That's why I'm using my fingers to go along the edge right now. Okay, so I'm going to let this set for just a minute, and then I'm going to run it through my sewing machine, and I'll be right back. Okay, so when I do my stitching around, what I like to do is I don't do the back and forth to lock my stitch in. Come into focus for me, please. I just start it up and then end it wherever I'm going to end it at. But I like to go in with just a small amount of glue just to secure in those threads, just where it starts and where it ends. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Just a small amount. It doesn't need to be a whole lot. Okay. Now on this one, I'm just trimming them pretty flush. Okay, so at this point I have my cover, and I'm just going to fold this back so that it's about half and half again. Now if you wanted to add like lace in on your edge or a closure, I would do that before I glued my two pieces of paper together. Right. This is a book that I just basically use for binding. And I'm going to use red embroidery floss this time. Yeah, I think that'll look good. Somewhere in here I have a needle. There we go. So there is a book binding jig that you can buy that basically it holds it down in a groove like this book is going to do. But I don't have that, so this is how I'm going to do it instead. And since I'm not, you know, it's different if I'm adding in multiple signatures where I want to make sure my holes are all where I want them to be. Something like this, I'm not super worried about it. So this is what I use for a hole punch. Just sharp object. I'm going to do one in the top. Oh, probably an inch from the top. One in the bottom. I'm just making sure that my pages are where I want them to be. And one about halfway. Okay, I'm sure I did not get very good penetration through all of these. We'll see here in just a second. I'm just checking to make sure that my holes went all the way through. So the nice thing about using something like a book is that when you start your holes, they're going to go through on the crease each time. And this cover is going to make it hard for me to see my holes. So I'm just putting my what is this called? Needle through to kind of make my holes stand out a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to get this back out of my way. Yes, I had the needle in my mouth during that. So I want my strings to end up on the inside of my journal, and I want them to end up from the top where I can tie both my strings together up here at the top. Because on this one, I believe I'm going to add some charms. So I'm going to go through my top hole. Okay, I lost my hole, so I paused it to do it again. So I'm through the top hole. Now I'm going to go back through this middle one. Hopefully I can find my hole. It's a little more challenging when you're doing the fabric because it kind of hides your holes. I think that's my hole. Yep, that's my hole. Okay, back for this middle one. Now there's a lot of people that used wax or will use like wax string, and sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It really depends on what I'm doing. This type of journal, once I'm done with it, I'm kind of done. So it's not going to get a lot of wear and tear. And honestly, I like the colors I can get with embroidery thread. I'll make sure, okay. I'm going to pull this through just because I'm going to have to hunt for where my hole is. There we go. But if you like wax thread, you can just take this and run it through a wax block, and it will add wax onto it for you. Alright, usually I try not to cut this off, but it's really driving me crazy at this point, so we're going to cut it off. So I've gone through this hole, back through here, and then through here. Now we're going to come back through this center hole. And I'm just opening it up so that I can see where my needle comes through at. Because if you're really good at this, you can stick your needle through and go through all your pages at the same time. However, that almost never works right for me. So I tend not to trust it. Yeah, I'm trying to hold this so you guys can see and I can see. So what I tend to do is just stick my needle through and then kind of without putting any force behind it, so that I can find out where it stopped. Okay, there we go. Now I'm just trying to make sure my strings are long enough. And of course, when I was pulling this one back through, I went through my strings on the other one. So they're wanting to misbehave. Okay. So I want my knot to go up here, but I'm just going to make sure that this is nice and snug. And I'm going to do 3 knots just to make sure. Okay, double check, those are nice and tight. I grabbed out a couple charms. So all I'm going to do is put these down at the bottom and knot them. Maybe, if that will behave for me. I'm tired of these coming undone. So obviously you can skip the glue step, but these strings kept wanting to come unraveled and they were bugging me, so I just put a little glue there to hold them together. Now what I'm doing is kind of judging how long I want these to be. Again, nothing spectacular, just tying a couple knots in them. Excuse me. Now what I want to do before I cut any of these strings is just come back in with my glue. Yes, we've tied knots in there and this is probably completely overkill. I just feel a little better. And I'm just going to put a little bit of glue at the end of each one of these knots. Now trim off my excess string. And then I've created a little charms for inside my journal. And if you didn't want those, you could just trim it right there. That's definitely not a problem. I like them coming from the top just because I like that length. And there is a really very simple one signature journal. Now, if I was making this normally, I would probably do a few less pages, but since I'm doing the December daily in it, I wanted it to have 30 pages, or 31. It's going to have 34, I think, counting them front and back. That works for me. But yeah, it's just kind of a simple, I at least think it's simple, journal. It'll go right in here. and then just look nice and pretty, right? At least I hope. That's my goal. I hope it's gonna look pretty, because if not, why did I make it? But this is why I love traveler's notebooks. This one I don't even have sewn together yet. Is that when I'm working on something, they can just slip right in underneath the elastic and get used. When I'm done with that book, then I just put in a new insert. So I hope everybody has a great day. Hopefully this helped. I know my binding, sewing in the binding while being on camera was probably a little terrifying to watch, but it worked. I'll see everybody later. Bye.